Hello everyone, Austin here with the Limestone Library, and welcome back to another chess video. I'm very excited to present this one to you. If you haven't already heard, there is a Netflix special that's out right now. I believe it's like 8 episodes long. I haven't finished it quite yet. But there's a Netflix special that's out called The Queen's Gambit, named after a chess opening, and it's a fully fledged out chess special on Netflix. It follows a young orphan named Beth Harmon, who she finds out that she has some kind of an interest in chess, and it documents her fictional climb through the chess rankings in the United States. And I have to admit, I was extremely skeptical at first. I am in general, when anyone who is around chess for a while and they sort of see how chess is presented in popular culture, usually it's presented extremely incorrectly. I mean, that's probably a great idea for a separate video. I'm going to have to write that down. It's chess in popular culture is usually a catastrophe. Everyone gets all these different little things wrong that are just completely inexcusable. So most movies and shows, they'll have the board set up wrong, the etiquette's all off, just some really egregious things like that, and just things that like chess players would never really do. But this one's up there with the likes of the Harry Potter chess scene, which that one is sort of that's the gold standard for chess accuracy. As weird as that sounds, they had an international master, Jeremy Silman. He was the chess consultant for that scene, and he of course did extremely well on the chess part of it. So this is really good. I haven't seen anything even close to as accurate as this, other than the Harry Potter chess scene, and it's extremely entertaining. It's a very good show. Like I said, I haven't finished the whole thing yet, but I do want to take a look at one of the first chess games in that show. Now, this is your official spoiler alert. So if you haven't seen, I want to say, the first 2 episodes, don't watch this video yet. Stop right now, turn it off, and go and buy Netflix if you don't have it, and watch this show. It's really, really good. It starts off a little bit slow, maybe just for the first 30 or so minutes, but it's incredible. And it's based off of a novel too, a novel of the same title in 1983, and it covers all the same themes, with feminism and drugs and alcoholism, and it's a really, really, I think, hard hitting show on like what it's like to be in the chess community as a young woman. Not that I would know that. But it has exceptional reviews from people who would, so I'm just the messenger here. So I want to take a look at one of the first games that the young Beth Harmon plays. And this is, if you haven't seen it yet, you really should have stopped watching by now. So I want to take a look at one of the first games that she plays. She was, and I can't remember the janitor's name. Like I said, I haven't finished the whole thing yet. Why don't we pull that up really quick here? What would it be? Queen's Gambit, and let's pop in the janitor. What is the janitor's name? Just so that Mr. Shaibel. Okay, so we will remember that. I have the chess game remembered, but I don't have his name. So she plays the janitor, Mr. Shaibel. He sort of is the one who, at first, reluctantly introduces her to the game of chess, and she very quickly picks up on it and eventually beats him. And then they switch sides, and then she plays white against them, and this is that game that I want to show. It's a really well played game. And this is sort of, after the first win, you're like, okay, that might be a fluke. Maybe Mr. Shaibel, what wasn't focused. He's just beating her in every single game. So it is really easy to lose focus when you're beating the same person over and over again. But then the second game comes around, and you can't really say the same things about the second game. It really is nothing short of brilliant. So the scene is they're still in the basement of this orphanage, dimly lit chessboard, just these nice, really old 60s, I guess, orphanage vibes, but just these old 60s vibes. In this dark and dimly lit room around the chessboard. So Beth opens with the white pieces. She opens with e4, and then Mr. Shaibel, as he does, meets with e5, and they've played these games over and over again. She very quickly picked up that you are supposed to control the center of the chessboard. So this is a pretty long-term favorite for her throughout the series. And then he defends with knight c6. We've covered this in videos in the past. We're fighting for the pawn. We're fighting for control of d4. So just central control in general. And Beth continues and plays bishop c4. So she opens with an Italian game. Again, this is sort of her reliable favorite throughout the series. And Mr. Shaibel continues bishop c5, developing a kingside piece just as Beth has, and Beth's ready to castle very soon, getting the kingside pieces out of the way, and this knight should come out soon. This is sort of the ideal plan. The knight really should be coming out quickly, and then getting the king castled, and sort of the draw for white playing this opening is that if black tries to get a little bit too cute, it could be a very short game. So obvious foreshadowing aside, Beth continues with c3, which might look a little bit weird to some, and I'm not sure if we've talked about this move before in any previous videos. But you would think that you would just go c3, develop another piece. Well, not so. Remember, the point of the knight move was, it attacks the pawn, but the real point was to control d4. So we really want to be playing this d4 move so that we can foster longer term development and better squares for our pieces once they do get developed. So we want c3 because we want to play d4. So we're preparing this. Mr. Shaibel plays pawn to d6. And it's at this point where I think d4 could be played, and I don't think it would be a very bad move at all. But she goes ahead and castles here, which again is also not a bad move, perfectly fine. And it's at this stage in her chess development, it's very customary to do this, to castle your king before playing a pawn break. And that's sort of the general rule, unless there's a good reason not to. So the good reason not to would be, well, you can play the pawn break now. It's good now. Just do it. And it is. It's a very strong pawn move. So she does sort of allow this queen e7 move, which, for Mr. Shaibel, he thought he was defending his position a little bit better. It does defend the e5 pawn again. It gets the queen off of this file, but this actually doesn't really help his position at all. And fortunately for Beth, she just takes apart just deconstructs the position very masterfully. So she continues with pawn to d4, and things haven't really gone Mr. Shaibel's way at this point. He's neglected development with a couple of moves here, with queen e7, with d6, and it's very easy to psych yourself out in the opening and to convince yourself that these are moves that you should play. Maybe he was considering playing bishop g4, castling queenside, and that's why he was going for these moves. I don't know. You can certainly do that. It's extremely risky. It's slower. It keeps your king in the center of the board longer. So now, it's time to pay the piper. It's time to figure out, exactly how we're going to deal with this, because white's played nearly perfectly. So she plays very principled, very intuitive chess. And this is even mentioned in the film. She's quite good at this, and the moves do come quick to her. Other chess players out there can also attest to this. These moves, I mean, c3, d4 is very natural. It's the typical plan in this opening. So Mr. Shaibel, to his credit, actually plays the right move here. He's not a bad player, but he's definitely the definition of what you would consider like a very casual coffeehouse player. And usually what they'll do is they'll attack and they'll take pieces whenever they can, and development is somewhat inconsistent, like we've seen so far. So pretty much like like Paul Morphy's opponents. So Mr. Shaibel, instead of taking, which that's probably no good, that's just going to open up the position a little bit more, which is not really what you want to do when you're behind in development and your king's in the center of the board. He plays bishop to b6, so credit to him. That's not the easiest move to find. This shows some restraint, not capturing this pawn. So now we're going to really get going here. After the bishop comes back, Beth plays a very nice move with bishop to g5. And it's at this point that this is Mr. Shaibel's last chance. He really should play knight to f6 so that he can finalize that kingside development and get the king castled. But he doesn't. He plays pawn to f6, which the old maxim in sort of beginner level chess is the f pawn. It stands for forget about it. Do not move that pawn. Do not move it unless you have a very good reason to do so. And this is just not there. I mean, why not just block it here? You don't really need to attack this bishop. So we have some options here. We could pull the bishop back to e3. Even these moves are options. I don't know if I've ever played it, but okay, or if I would ever play it. But okay, Beth pulls back to h4, which it's okay. The bishop is probably much more active on e3, but she kind of gets what she wants here, I think. g5 is played, and now we're Mr. Shaibel's really playing with fire here. The first move here that an experienced chess player might look at is, since this king has started to open up, and I mean, this is definitely something that's probably on Beth's radar. I would think right away, as soon as g5 is played. An experienced chess player, when this weakness becomes very obvious, they're going to want to look at checks and captures on the board. So the first move that comes to mind is knight takes g5. And then the next move, I suppose, is bishop g3. And those really become the only two moves that you look at. So you're doing most of your thinking time goes into figuring out, okay, does knight takes g5 work? Do I have enough? And Beth decides, well, yeah, I think I do. So we're going to play knight takes g5, f takes g5. And then now, like I had mentioned, the next logical thing to look for is to continue with those tempo moves like we talked about when we looked over the opera game with Paul Morphy. So this is the clearest check here, queen h5 check. Hits the king, hits this as well. So now we don't really have to move our bishop back ever. We can just snap off the g5 pawn when it's convenient for us. So black doesn't really want to go king d8. I mean, they're gonna work themselves into a pin, which they can play knight f6 against, but then queen h6 and rook f8 to guard the knight, and then f4 is happening. I can show this on the board. It's a little bit uncomfortable for black. So queen h6, rook f8, need to guard the knight, and then it's just cracking open. I mean, there's not a hope in the world for black here. So where are we here? King d8. So king d8 we don't really want to play. We don't want to go king f8 because then I'm sure f4 right away is just perfectly fine. Just trying to get this rook into the game. So instead what we see is king to d7, running Mr. Shaibel running for his life. And again, this is another cautionary tale in the opening. You don't have to study fancy openings. It's probably much more important just to follow the opening principles, get your pieces out, developed, and get your king castled, and just make sure that you're playing towards the center of the board. So this is definitely a cautionary tale for that. Okay, it's Beth's turn, and it's time just to continue this attack. Bishop takes g5, which was half the point of playing queen to h5 check. And, it could still get a little weird here. If knight f6 is found, we get a similar position where we have queen h6 and rook f8 and f4. So that is a similar position, but it's I would think a little bit better for black, since black has the king on d7 instead. So it's at least out of the scope of this terrifying dark squared bishop. But that's not what's played. Mr. Shaibel makes an enormous mistake here and plays queen to g7, which, okay, you kind of understand, because you look at knight f6 and you look at all those moves that I mentioned with queen h6, f4 coming, and it just doesn't really look like you can hold that position. If you see queen g7, it's probably very attractive to go for this move if you don't see the continuation. Well, Beth does, and this is where I'll give you guys the chance to pause the video and see if you can find the best continuation here, and always keep in mind that you want to find the best moves for black as well. So we're not really, we could look at something like this, but they're just going to move the knight. So we don't really want to, just do something like that thinking that, they're just going to leave their knight there hanging. So take a second, pause the video, and see what you can come up with. All right. So Beth's in a tough position here. She is down a piece. So if the attack doesn't work, then she's in some serious trouble, being down material. But she finds it here, and the sort of chess guidelines that she follows are stuff that we've talked about before. They're simple to understand and pretty hard to master and hard to apply when you're in a chess game. So Beth sees that the king is very weak, and being down a piece, this is really what we should be focusing on. We should be attacking this. So we want to look for tempo moves, specifically checks first, to try to attack this king. And we only really have 3 pieces to work with. These pieces aren't going to be coming into the game anytime soon. So it's really just the bishop pair and this pretty active queen here. So if we're looking at checks, there is this check, but that just trades the queens. So nothing to really show for there. There's queen e8 check, which is just gives away the queen, and then after the king takes, there's not really any good checks. There's no follow-up there. We're not really getting anything, not really getting anywhere with weak squares, anything like that. There is queen g4 and queen g3, or queen h3, but with that one, we are sort of pulling our queen out of the position a little bit. That's not really the diagonal that we want to be focusing on for the queen, because if we, just for an example, if we do go here, okay, the king does only have one move, and then now we're in this position where we're, okay, where do we go next with the queen? This dark square bishop owns this diagonal. So that was what I meant when I said we can't really play on that file. And then if we decide to go back, then just queen g6, and black should just have a comfortable win here. So we'll remove those. And yeah, this is kind of interesting. We actually have this game in the Lichess database, and rook to e1 was played between a couple of 2000s. So this is not the easiest position, even a 2000 and a Lichess rated online player rated 2000 missed this move. So the only other check is bishop to e6. And then we have to figure out, okay, well, is there a follow-up? And there most certainly is. So this is how the game concluded. We have bishop to e6 check, and there is no other move here other than to take the bishop. So this is what I meant when, you want to assume that your opponent is going to play the best chess, and when you only give them one move to make, they don't have much of an option. So it is completely forced. And she continues. She pulled the king away from control of this e8 square, opening up one of the other checks that we talked about before. That didn't work, but now it does. So queen check, and it doesn't matter what blocks, but in the game it was knight g to e7 that blocked, and then she continued with the next check that that made sense, and she earns the checkmate. A great game in just 14 moves against her first mentor, really, first chess mentor, Mr. Shaibel. So again, this is just another great example of a very principled player who, she followed all of her chess rules, knew when to break some of them, right? She did sacrifice a piece, and typically you don't do that unless you have a really good reason to do so, right? You're not giving up pieces for pawns all the time. So just followed very principled chess, and developed her pieces properly, and her opponent didn't. So that's what we get out of this one. I hope to be able to find more of the games to review. As you can imagine, they don't exactly, you're not for a Netflix special or just any media, really, you're not really showing the entire chess game. So the games can be a little bit hard to find, but I was happy to be able to find this one. I am looking forward to finding more of them and going over those games with you guys as well. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.